Bill, I'm going to hand over to you.
Excellent. Thank you, Ingrid. It's great to be here with all of you today. Hopefully the audio video looks like it's working great, so appreciate your team setting all that up. But we're going to talk a little bit about data protection and backup and recovery in particular. There's been some great discussions already about a number of things. I've been listening in. It's been very informative for me. But I want to talk a little bit about that, what's going on, what's happening in our industry in terms of data. I've been involved in storage for a long, long time now, back with EMC, with Lenovo, a number of very large enterprise storage companies. And it's amazing how things have changed over time. So I want to kind of focus in on all of that and level set a little bit to start out with some basic drivers of what's going on in the industry. You know, what's happening in technology, what are the challenges? That's what I'd like to kind of focus on a little bit. Again, these drivers and challenges. Now, first, the technology evolution. You're probably all a bit familiar with this, so I apologize if this goes back too far, but there's been a lot of changes. If you will, on the compute side, on the network side, and also just on simple capacity. Again, gigaflop compute technologies, it hasn't been talked about for some time, but that used to be reserved for only those really high-end enterprise type companies or corporations or really, really big governmental type things, along with the multi-gig networks and petabyte type scales in terms of capacity. And what we're seeing is that's really just moving to the small, medium business, as well as your small communal organizations and governments. It is just, all that technology is now coming downstream, if I could call it that. And at the same time, just an explosion of data. Data is coming in from many different directions, and the Internet of Things. It's causing things to need to be more sophisticated. In terms of the data that's out there today, it's estimated that 90% of all the data out there in the world that's being stored was produced in the last 2 years. That's just wild, just crazy. But I can imagine you're seeing it in your own departments and things, how much more is being generated. And we're going to talk a little bit more about all that. But again, that shift in technology has caused a need for the evolution of your backup and recovery to do the same, to change. Now, let's dig in a little deeper in that data. It's exploding, it's growing very quickly, but the type of data is changing a bit. It used to be very structured data. It was very easy to see, hey, there's these type of files that are being created every day, where now it's massively unstructured data. There's all kinds of things that are creating data, be it sensors, as I mentioned, the Internet of Things, different devices, video, instant messaging tools, Zoom, Teams, different things we're using now much more often are all creating more and more data. And what happens is all this data is growing, and again, the majority of it's unstructured data. So we needed a new way to handle that. And to dig in a little more, there are lots of silos in terms of what kind of data is being created, and some data is very critical, needs low latency databases, and it's mission critical. Whereas the majority of the data is not in that silo. It's your things we've talked about, test data, just Internet of Things, different stuff that's coming in, and it's causing the current infrastructure, the tools we use today or in the past, to really become obsolete or inefficient and costly in handling all this data. It really takes a lot of management to handle it. Again, I know you're familiar with this, but I think it's a good, just to set that tone or that base foundation of what's going on in terms of the data, and specifically the different types of data, because that really matters as we look at how we solve the problems of backing up and recovering it. And getting into that, the backup and recovery, there's management of the backup windows. When do you back things up? The recovery time, how long does it take to recover some of that data that's been created or lost? We've been plagued. This year's been an interesting year for sure in terms of natural disasters and things, from obviously the pandemic, fires, hurricanes. It doesn't matter where you're at. I'm based in the US. We've got our challenges here. I know that everyone around the world's faced, it seems, a little extra this year. Um, and those all can contribute to downtime and inability to get into an office. Um, Usually I'd say human issues or errors are the biggest cause of downtime, but really we've had a lot of natural disasters feed into it this year. And you can see the different reasons for that. But regardless of why you have downtime, or maybe data has been compromised, it's the cost of being down that really is changing, and it really hurts. Here you can see some data. A little of this is a little dated, but you can see the wide variability from a small business to really large corporations, where that cost of downtime is extremely high, where the average is 160,000. This is US dollars per hour. And when you're focused on service-oriented businesses, as I imagine most of you are, because you're a government or related in the public sector, it's very service related. And when those services go down because the systems are down, there's a huge cost, not just in terms of dollars, but just the human cost and that trust that's needed. So it becomes really critical. And I wish I say no one ever had downtime, but it happens a lot. As you can see, downtime here in this study showed about 3.9, so 4 times a year that there's some type of event that causes downtime. Now, looking at other causes, I think another big challenge we have today is the data security challenges, cybercrime. Ransomware is pernicious. It's become very bad. And targeting government, schools, education, medical, it's been really rampant and growing. Here back in 2019, it was predicted to be an 11.5 billion in terms of damages caused by ransomware. And I know it's about double that now is the prediction. And unfortunately, these nefarious actors, when they see disasters like we've suffered, they look at this as an opportunity to attack and double down on what they're doing to take advantage. So data security is extremely important. One, to prevent that, have a lot of security, keep your data safe, your systems, and you need to have those lines of defense up. But at the same time, you have to be prepared for if something gets through. What's your remediation? Can you get to your data? Can you get your systems up and running in a reasonable amount of time? And then finally, how do you restore? How do you get that data back? All of these things are key to a disaster recovery plan. And of course, the worst thing you can do is not plan at all and have no plan, or have something that's never actually been exercised or thought through. Again, that's that prevention piece. If you do that first, it can sure help a lot in the remediation and restoration. I wanted to spend just an extra minute on working from home. This year's been very interesting. Working from home has not been a new thing, but wow, the volume of people who've gone back home to work, given the pandemic and our need to be distant and not interacting like we were. It's created a whole new challenge, as many of you have, I'm sure, have experienced, as you struggle to get everybody able to run from home and do their work there. But now we have to figure out, how do we manage all of this data and all these unmanaged devices, be it laptops, mobile devices of other kinds? How do we protect full images, specific files? These things are all solutions that have to be figured out. Again, this is part of that evolution of data and the situation we're in. And it gets complicated too, because now you have to think, okay, do we just back up data on premise? Meaning maybe you ship everybody a hard drive of some kind, a thumb drive, back up to that, and we'll restore from that, a network storage device maybe. Or possibly your city or locality has a DR site or a central data center that they can have people replicate their data to it. But what do you do when the network's down or they can't connect? Are you still protected? And I'll even put in here, take advantage of a private, public, purpose-built disaster recovery cloud like our StorageCraft cloud services, where you can put things in an offsite location that's secure and designed for that disaster recovery if you need it. Wanted to mention as well, the use of Office 365 and G Suite tools has greatly increased. We've seen a lot of that with the partners that we work with. Again, people have gone home, and now the need to use those tools has gone way up. Just to give an example, there's a company we work with who represents and works with a fire department. And the fire department, because they've gone home, and this is more the management side of the fire department, not so much those who are actually doing the firefighting, but they now are recording all of their meetings. And also when things are tendered, like a new offering to upgrade something in their facilities or things, all of those are recorded because they're now required to prove that they're not being biased, and they're looking at things in an objective manner, and they have to keep all of this data in terms of video recordings and things so they can show that, hey, we were objective, we were looking at these things. Again, something they never had to worry about before because they were meeting in person and people were together and everyone can make it more easily. Where now they're remote, they've had to come up with a different solution and record all that data, which now has to be protected. And how do you recover it if it is get damaged or something happened to it? So all of these have added just more layers to this onion of challenge. And I'll add one more, compliance regulations and these requirements. I'm sure you're all very familiar with these, and it's around the globe. It doesn't matter where you're at. This has definitely increased from GDPR in Europe, the notifiable data breaches scheme in Australia. It's one I've learned about recently. Or in California, the Data Privacy Acts here, as well as it seems just every geography you go to now has some rule about how data is treated, personal identifiable data, how protected it is and how secure, and reporting, and those things all become one more piece to this puzzle that has to be solved when you're looking at backup and recovery. And when I say that, I want to summarize a little bit the things I just talked about. It's really a tough equation to solve. And I'm speaking to all of you, and you probably realize that too. It really is not simple. You've got this data growth that's just growing. It seems like it never ends. And you've got to meet all the business requirements that you've been given. The legacy scale-up architectures are just not working. They take forklift type upgrades, a lot of capital investment. Now the cost of when things do go down is getting higher and higher. Many businesses who lose their data never recover. And I imagine for everybody, it still costs a lot, even if they do recover. So you have to have a way to deal with that. Cybercrime, compliance, as I mentioned, the management complexity. And as I mentioned, unfortunately, we see there's a lot of companies out there who don't have a full disaster recovery plan. So when it comes to backup and recovery, they've only got an idea of one and not a real plan. And usually when they need it, so, it's too late. And then lastly, I'll mention, vendor consolidation, because as you look at solutions, there's so many out there. You could really spread yourself pretty thin with many, many different solutions from different vendors. And then you have to manage all of that. And I'm sure there's costs, not just in terms of license fees and things, but then the operational costs of having someone manage and become an expert of each of those pieces. So a pretty tough equation, if you will, to solve. So I want to talk a little bit more looking ahead, what's going on in our market in terms of backup and recovery and solutions. What are we doing to make solutions better to address these things I just talked about? And I know I talked about a lot of them. So first and foremost, all data is not created equal. So today, basically you have all your data sitting on some server, maybe a number of servers, and really it's content agnostic. It doesn't look in and say, oh, well, this is stuff that's really important because it runs the database or whatever it might be. Or, hey, this is really critical. It's got licenses or other tools that we need. It's got images on it that we need. It's for police or security. It all just looks like one big lump of data. And you set up a single policy to back all that up to, say, an SSD hard drive, or maybe it's to a cloud type location, and it just treats it all the same and moves it across and backs it up. And then the same's on the recovery. It tries to restore those all the same. So what's going on in the tomorrow world and what's going on right now, and you've probably seen in many solutions, is they're becoming very content driven. Now we look into the data and can you can set up policies that will define, hey, this specific kind of data, in this case, the example here, you've got a customer database, you got financial records. We definitely want to protect them in a cloud-based solution, something that's off-prem, secure, where other things, design files, maybe some surveillance, not as critical to put up in the cloud, but let's store them to local storage. I've got some enterprise storage that scales out. I want to use that locally. Let's put it there. Anyway, being content driven versus, again, just ignoring that and treating everything equal. There's a lot of detail there, but that's fundamentally the change that's going on. And the other thing we see is this hybrid deployment where no one's choosing just one or the other, but really deciding, hey, I can have multiple policies for different data and different applications. So maybe for disaster recovery, I utilize a backup policy that protects certain data and puts it up in a cloud like the StorageCraft cloud. Other things, hey, I do need SSD type performance for data like this, and I'll store my critical database, whatever it might be there. And other things, like maybe my video surveillance can be on colder local storage. I can do that and use that content and a policy specific for that. And that way you really leverage all the benefits of things that are as a service like DR or local hardware or capital you've already invested in, as well as having policies that are specific to each type of data, and you can personalize it or customize it to whatever's needed. And that's fundamentally some of the vision that's going on and happening now, and in the future, you'll see more of that. So I've been talking a lot, and I like to always add a third party, feedback, because it's not just my word and StorageCraft and where I represent, but looking at IDC, they gave some essential guidance as you're looking, to solve these challenges. And I'm just going to read through these one by one because I think they're really key. One, focus on the simplicity of data protection and recovery operations. I think simplicity is so key. You want to have something that does it all, but you got to keep it simple and don't overcomplicate your plan. Next, enhancing IT operations capability to run infrastructure as a code. We've got to get so we're not away from this infrastructure, but more of this service, so things can adapt and adjust as needed, depending on your needs. Obviously with COVID, we've all had to adapt. We had to learn and adjust. And those who've adapted and done more infrastructure as a service or as code have been able to switch a little faster than those who are doing forklift upgrades. And then the next two, think about the application experience and not just protection and recovery. So again, application-based, content-specific. And lastly, integrating as a service, cloud applications and data into the overall data protection recovery strategy. This one I think is key as a hybrid approach, as I mentioned just before. Look at things that are as a service. It's sometimes much more efficient to utilize something that's designed and run and controlled, if you will, by a service provider versus building it up all on your own, having to manage that operationally and becoming experts at that all the time and have to refresh. So I think that's some good advice from IDC as well as some guidance in what you're doing. So I want to jump in and just really quickly show a few of our solutions with StorageCraft, what we've done to address these challenges, these needs around data protection and recovery. And really, we've got three pillars that we've built our portfolio around. That's data protection, disaster recovery as a service, and data management. And many of you, I hope, are familiar, have heard of StorageCraft and our Shadow Protect software. It's been around a long time. For over a decade, it's been out there and used and very robust and reliable. We've got our Shadow Safe, our newer data protection solution, our OneSafe hardware, scale out object storage, as well as our cloud services and disaster recovery as a service, and our new OneSafe Solo, which is a small device to help you to go deploy in remote offices and quickly and easily do the protection and get that integrated. We've designed it all to be a building blocks approach because we know one solution is not necessarily going to solve everyone's problems all the time, but they can be used as building blocks where you can use some at, say, a central site, your office, the government location, where you can protect things on premise and locally, be it data storage or just data protection. And then also be able to address branch and remote offices using ShadowSafe or our OneSafe Solo, and then also replicating to the cloud and have a disaster recovery where you can virtualize and run machines in case of a disaster where something locally is totally untouchable, destroyed, or you just can't get access to it. You can run it all from the cloud. So really a robust bunch of solutions to help you address the challenges I was talking before. And I want to hit on the last one, just ransomware. Be it our OneSafe that has immutable snapshots where basically they're protected, they can't be changed. So you can always recover back to the 90 seconds before an attack happened and get up and running very quickly. These are really important. Or in the cloud, you've used Shadow Protect, ShadowSafe to create different images, and now you can recover back to that moment before ransomware and get back up and going really quickly. Now, I didn't want to spend a lot of time on our stuff because really it's about the data is changing, the challenges are changing, and you need to have a plan to address it. But our solutions are across all major verticals, being used by government, education, healthcare, in lots of different places. So we're proven, and put that plug in with our solutions. And I want to let you know, I want to have some time here for questions. I think we only have a few minutes left, but I know we've got a virtual booth. If you want to learn some more about our solutions, about the changing nature of data, please go attend that little virtual booth, and you can learn some more.